going on here in Virginia is going to show up in Washington real soon on a larger scale. So if you want to talk about right to work, if you want to talk about pro-life stuff, if you want to talk about the Second Amendment, which are very important Commonwealth of Virginia issues right now, I'm happy to do that. They're not as big a deal at the federal level right now. There's a lot of other things going on up there that I'm really interested in. But we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. But first, I just wanted to introduce myself. A lot of you know who I am, or a little bits and pieces about me. I grew up in, I consider myself a Virginian. I wasn't born in what we call Virginia today. I was born in Ohio, and I was raised in Michigan. But because of my love of history, I know that there was a time when Michigan and Ohio were all part of Virginia. If you look at the map of the North American continent, around the time of 1606, 1607, when King James I signed the charter for the Virginia Company to come over here, and the first folks came over and settled in Jamestown, that map included what they call the Old Northwest, which is all of Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. So I consider myself a historical Virginian. Is that cheating? Maybe a little bit.
Maybe a tad.
But I do have, and I can trace my lineage on my dad's side all the way back to John Rolfe and Pocahontas. So I'm John Rolfe and Pocahontas. Now, when I shared that little bit of information last night with the group over at the Trump rally, people started laughing when I talked about Pocahontas because they associated with the governor, with the senator from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren. Because President Trump likes to call her Pocahontas. She claims all this Native American blood in her. And my comment to this assembled group last night was that when they call her Pocahontas, they're doing a huge disservice to the memory of my grandmother. And that's true, because Elizabeth Warren's a socialist. She only thinks about her own elite friends. So I started off there. I've been a Navy officer. I was a 20-year career in the Navy. I went to the University of Michigan, and that's where I got my Navy commission. So I was in the surface warfare community, so I was with the ships. And I've driven ships all over both oceans, well, Pacific and the Atlantic. I've served on 6 of the 7 continents. The only continent I haven't been to yet is Antarctica, but I'm still a young man.
That's right.
That's right. So,
Put that on your life list. Not your bucket list, your life list.
my life is. I like that. So, now someday I would love to see Antarctica. Maybe when global warming makes it nice enough down there to build a continent. Yeah.
When it floats down here.
And when they start registering penguins to vote, right? So I had a career in the Navy, and the last tour of duty I had was at the embassy in Mexico City. So I lived for 3 years in another country. And for the first time in my life, I lived as a minority group. Now, we're all white folk here. We really don't know what it feels like to be a minority. But after I lived in Mexico for 3 years as a minority, I had a whole new sympathy and compassion for the minority groups living in America. And I got to tell you, I used to be really kind of ticked off that they had their own Black History Month. But I'm not anymore. I'm not anymore. I don't hold that against them. I'm not angry at them because they're a minority. And you just don't know what it feels like until you've been there. And it's not a comfortable place to be. The language may be the same, but there's a slightly different culture, a slightly different perspective, and you feel like everyone's looking at you, and it's just not comfortable. Anyway, so I have a different perspective than a lot of white folk do about the minorities in our nation. That was a really good tour of duty. I got to travel all over Central and South America. I developed a language skill in Spanish. It's kind of shaky now, but I think I could maybe pick it up if I needed to. But I've also been an advocate for veterans, and I'm really proud of that. I have friends in the room tonight, Marie and Jim, who I met with the Concerned Veterans for America organization. We are, well, the CVA, Concerned Veterans for America, is a political advocacy grassroots lobby organization. They're not like the Veterans of Foreign Wars or the American Legion. Those are service organizations, and they have a very important role to fill in the life of our veterans. What we did was we put pressure from the grassroots on politicians to get them to promote and vote in legislation that would favor our veterans, take care of our veterans, and do right by our veterans. And I'm really, really proud of my association with that group because we were able to see some pretty neat things happen over the last couple of years. Probably the most significant thing that's happened for our veterans in the last 5 years or so has been an act called the Mission Act. The Mission Act is a large, comprehensive redoing of how the Veterans Administration does health care treatment across the country, across the whole system. And it's such a big thing that is being phased in over 8 or 10 year period. But one of the things that have been such a problem for veterans, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here unless you want to, is access to good health care. There are places in this country where the nearest healthcare facility that a veteran could go to maybe 6 or 8 hours from where they live. And they had so many challenges with scheduling appointments that more often than not, you'd have a veteran drive 6 hours to get to the medical center or the clinic where he could go that had a big VA sign on it. And you find out that his appointment had been shifted a month down the road. You know, and this is just outrageous. I'm sure many of you have heard horror stories about some of the things that happen to veterans waiting for treatment at VA medical centers. And it is just absolutely disgraceful. Well, those things are changing. And people like Jim and Marie and myself were involved in orchestrating the pressure on politicians to vote the right way on this legislation. And I'm really excited that President Trump is so strongly pro-veteran. Because of what he's doing, we've been able to see a lot of advantages finally start accruing to our veterans. I'm really, really proud of that. I used to work for the National Right to Work Committee. And I mentioned right to work a little bit earlier because it's a big deal in Virginia. Virginia is a right to work state.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Democrat majority up in the legislature in Richmond and our absolutely criminally insane governor have are making an effort to either water it down or eliminate it altogether. And that's going to be trouble. That's going to be a lot of trouble. Virginia's a pretty good place to open up, start up a new business these days. We lose our right to work law. We're going to start seeing the cost of labor go up. And we're going to start seeing businesses go elsewhere. Not even start here, or ones that are trying to get going, heading south of the border, because North Carolina is a right to work state. So I can speak long and passionately about the right to work issue. I've been a crew trainer and a shift manager at a local food establishment similar to this one, a franchise.
You gotta eat.
I was there for 6 years. I'm a property management administrator right now. I work with Cindy in an office out of Virginia Beach. And then finally, when I left the Navy after my 20-year career, I taught high school history. And the school I taught at was a private Christian school. Well, I had 1 year in the public system and then went over to this private school. And I taught world history and I taught Old Testament. And I was there for 5 years. And it was 5 of the best years of my vocational life ever. And I loved my time in the Navy. This was such an amazing experience for me. As I look back over my shoulder at the journey I've been on to this point right now, I realized that when I was at Stonebridge, I was being paid to teach, and I did. And I think I was pretty effective at it.
Go ahead, you're fine.
Please. But I was there more as a student than I was there as a teacher, because I learned so much. And what I learned was so profoundly impactful that it's the foundation of why I'm in front of you today, why I'm running in this campaign. Because not only did I teach world history, I taught it from a God's eye view. Providential perspective of history. Now, I've always loved to study history. I would gravitate towards books in the library that were historical books, historical fiction, maybe biographies of great historical people, even history books. I would just love to read it. I love maps and geography and all that stuff. So it's natural for me to just enjoy history anyway. And then I started learning how to teach history from a God's eye perspective. And it almost made me angry that I had been cheated out of knowing this for all my life before then. Because it gives history a relevance that you just can't miss. Every person in God's creation has a role to play in his big plan. I mean, you could look at it like a huge play, a worldwide, long-term play going on, and everybody has an important role to play, an important place in the whole thing. It's like one thread in a huge, beautiful tapestry, or maybe one piece of an amazing jigsaw puzzle. If that piece is missing, if that thread's not there, the whole is not complete. And that's true of humans. The study of history is only about people, right? How people interact with each other, how they deal with crisis situations, you know. And if you love people, you can't help but love history. And so many people don't love history because it's just a bunch of, well, why do you got to worry about dead people? You know? I heard that a lot as a teacher. What's the big deal? Why do I have to know when this happened? Well, because when things always happen in sequence. What happened yesterday is the reason what's happening today is happening. And if we don't understand our place on the timeline, we're going to lose our sense of who we are, and where we've been, and we won't know where we should be going. So I started getting a real sense of this when I was teaching. And I was learning this as a student so I could teach it. The other thing I learned over there was this biblical worldview idea. I mean, we all have a way of thinking about things. And usually we don't even think about why we believe what we believe or why we react certain ways to different things going on. But what it is it's a worldview. And there are a lot of different kinds of worldviews out there. And I began to understand a little bit more about it. And I've been studying the biblical worldview now since probably 2002. Sometimes a little more formally than others. One of the life groups I lead at the church where I go is a worldview study class. And I've been through the curriculum a couple times now, and I'm still learning stuff. Why this is important is because when we look at the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, our two most significant founding documents, if you don't understand the worldview and how people thought, who wrote those documents, you really don't have a sense of what they really mean. And we've been running into a problem with how to interpret the Constitution these days. And that's why there could be a concerted effort up in Richmond right now to try and undo our Second Amendment rights. It's important why things were written. And we just know what's written. If we don't know why it's written, we end up letting it go. And that's true in just about everything we look at these days. Then I taught Bible too, and that's fascinating. Of course, the Old Testament's a lot of history, so it's kind of a natural fit for me. But being so immersed in Scripture for the first time in my life, and I've been around the Bible all my life, a lot of it started sinking in, and really started taking root in me. And I started to realize that our founding fathers really understood the Bible. And when they put those two documents together, the Declaration of Independence, and when they put the Constitution together, they were using biblical precedents for those. Do you know the reason we have a republic today? Well, it's hardly a republic anymore. But the one we were given, the government we were given, was a republic. When I was in high school, learning American history, I was taught that the founding fathers learned about democracy from the Greeks, and they learned about the republic from the Romans. And the republic seemed like a better idea because it lasted longer for Rome, so that's what they went with. Well, that's a bunch of baloney. 1,000 years before the Romans came up with the idea of a secular republic, which is what they had, God's people were coming out of Egypt, where they had just spent 400 years in slavery. And the government God gave them was a federal, constitutional, theocratic republic. And you can find it in Scripture if you will only look for it. A republic. It had a two-house legislature, it had an independent judiciary, and it had a strong central executive leader. Now, the head of state was God, the head of government, and the head of the church was also God. So for the Hebrew people coming out of Egypt, there was no separation of church and state. We hear a lot about that these days. But our founding fathers understood that there was supposed to be no separation of church and state. They knew.
So he was a Republican?
Absolutely. Well, he would have been a Republican today, right? So, and not a rhino either. But when you understand the foundation of things, things just make a lot more sense. But we're not being taught that in school these days. So one of my big issues that I want to take with me when I go up there, and I want to get on this committee in the House of Representatives, is the Education Committee. Because right now the federal government is pretty much dictating what kind of curriculum will be in every public school in the United States. And it doesn't matter what the parents on the school board say. If they want federal funding, they have to use the federal curriculum. And that is a pretty big hammer that the government has to make sure that the students graduating from high school these days believe exactly what they do. So every year in June, we get 3 million new socialists graduating from the public high schools in the United States. Okay? And it shouldn't surprise us that 60% of the people under the age of 25 or 30 believe Bernie Sanders is some kind of Jesus figure. I mean, we're old enough to go, how can this be? Most of us have memories of the fall of communism, and we were seeing images on the television regularly of how life was so awful behind the Iron Curtain or in the communist part of Asia. Some of us remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, although we were pretty young back then. That was scary. They were putting nuclear missiles right off our coast in a communist country. I've been to Cuba in the last 5 years, and they've lightened up a lot down there with passing Fidel Castro, but it is still a socialist dictatorship, and there's such a spirit of poverty down there. Just can't. So, yeah, we all know that socialism is an evil, decaying, decadent system. We all know that, but the young people don't because they're not being taught. So one of the things I want to see, one of the things I want to do when I'm in Congress is get on the Education Committee and begin influencing legislation that'll start pulling the federal government out of the education system for children. I believe the federal government has no responsibility whatsoever in the education of America's children. None. Ultimately, I don't think they should even be involved in college education. One step at a time, right? Education should be controlled. The parent is the principal, the primary and principal educator of their children. Okay? And if the parent can't do it, they ought to be able to find someone else who will. Someone else who believes like they do. Someone else who will help their children grow up with the same kind of values that the family has. And it's just too hard these days. There was a time where there was no public education in the United States whatsoever. None of our founding fathers had a public high school education, public any kind of education. And yet they were some of the most amazing human beings that ever lived. How did that happen? Private schooling, homeschooling, church schooling, and it produced a caliber of individual, the likes of which you haven't seen in the world. I mean, a whole group of them at the same time. And I'm saying we need to radically redo the way we do our education system. I'm pro-life, as you might imagine, with a campaign focus on restoring biblical values to government and to the public policy debate. You can imagine that I'm strongly pro-life. But when I say I'm pro-life, I'm not just talking about what goes on in the womb of a woman who's pregnant. That's incredibly and essentially important. We protect that baby. But life goes all the way from the first, from the conception all the way to the last natural breath. Okay? And part of that is the preservation of life. Life is the first gift that God gave to his most significant part of creation, human beings, life. And God says it's so important because we're made in his image. We need to protect it. Governments are set up to do that. But we also have the inherent right of self-defense, so I'm a strong advocate for the Second Amendment. I don't want to stop there, though. I'm a strong advocate for the Constitution and all the Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment is under attack lately. And so I'm very, very strong on the self-defense issue and with the Second Amendment. I'm also pro-liberty, so you might get a sense in the first part of the Declaration of Independence, the committee and then ultimately people that signed the document stated that the inalienable rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are the things that a legitimate government should be preserving and protecting. So I'm pro-life and pro-liberty. Now what do I mean by that? Liberty, what are the kind of things that impact your liberty? What are the kind of things that keep you from doing the things you really love to do? Well, obviously there are laws out there that prevent us from doing certain things, and probably they're a good idea. And that's why we all submit to traffic laws, so we don't have a bunch of people banging each other up out there. So there are some liberties that we voluntarily surrender for the sake of living together safely. But there are things we would like to be able to do that can't do. And it may be being able to give more to your church, because you really like what your church is doing around the world or in your own neighborhood. But if you don't have enough money to survive on, you can't do that. So liberty involves a lot of economic stuff. And I like what the president's been doing lately. Since he's been in office, we've had our economy turn around radically. I think we're a long ways from where we could be. But look at the opposition our president's had while he's been up there. What if the House of Representatives had been in friendly hands instead of in the hands of opponents, and he had been able to accomplish some of his real ideas? It's unbelievable what our life might be like today, but for all the opposition. And it's one of my intentions to help flip the House of Representatives back to the Republican side. And when we need to get rid of a guy like Bobby Scott, who's been up there, who's voted against the president every chance he gets. It's just total obstructionism. There's a lot of other Democrats and Republicans that need to be changed out too. In our neighborhood, the 2nd District in Virginia Beach, Elaine Luria, also a former Navy officer, has been voting the Democrat Party line ever since she's been up there. She has betrayed her principles. The 4th District, Don McEachin is the Democrat congressman. He's from the Richmond area, but he represents almost over half of Chesapeake. He never bothers to come down here. He doesn't care. But he's the one who came out and said if Governor Northam passes legislation that criminalizes the possession of certain firearms, that the National Guard can come out and confiscate them at gunpoint. Why a congressman would stick his nose in state politics like that is beyond imagination. I believe he just effectively torpedoed his own career. So there's a lot of work to do in getting the House back with the red side, the Republican side. So on pro-private property, if you think about it, the 10 Commandments, the first 4 are about our vertical relationship, how we should interact with our God. But the other 6 are about our horizontal relationships, and 2 of those deal with property. Thou shalt not steal somebody else's stuff. And then what's the other one? What's the other one that deals with property?
Covet.
Thou shalt not even covet your other neighbor's stuff. God saw fit to make 2 commandments in the 10 that deal with private, personal property. We need to protect and value that. And so that's a taxation issue, because when we're taxed, we're forced to give money to the government. And money is one of those things that we have that enables us to do the stuff that we want to do. But if we have to give it all to the government, or more of it than we need to, we're limiting our own liberty. And so I want to see property rights taken better care of. I'm pro-family, as you might imagine. What are the kind of things that negatively impact family? Taxation, the inability to send their children to the school they want them to go to. A lot of things that need improvement to make the families better off. Do you know there are people out there who are biblical believers, who believe that the family unit should be one man and one woman married with children, that aren't able to do that they're actually paid to not be married. They're paid to not have the husband as part of the family. They get more money the more children they get, and it's all federal. There are federal incentives out there to keep women having children out of wedlock and having bigger and bigger families and becoming more and more dependent on government. That has to stop. There needs to be a fix to that. I don't know the exact fix to that, but these safety nets need to be improved so that they're not long-term and they're certainly not generational. which is what we have today. People who will invest in themselves and go out and help themselves need to be encouraged and not penalized. And that's what the system currently does. So I'm very strongly pro-family. I've already talked enough about education. Pro-military, as you can imagine, as a veteran, I don't want to see us doing anything with our military that's unnecessary. Our military forces should be for one use only, and that's the defense of our dirt, the defense of our people. And we don't need to be going off on these crazy foreign policy adventures in remote corners of the world because somebody else won't do their job. I am strongly behind what President Trump has been doing. We've had all kinds of stuff going on in the Middle East since he's been in office, and Iran has been purposely trying to provoke a war with us, and he has been able to effectively stay away from it. Now, he took out one of their senior terrorist commanders with a strategic strike a couple months ago, and everyone got in his face about it. But we didn't risk any human lives in that except the enemy. The guy was wearing a uniform. He wasn't even in the country. He was there setting up terrorist attacks on American soldiers when we took him out. President Trump has got the right idea here, and I believe he wants to get all of American soldiers back in the United States to the extent that he can. I'm all about that. I want to see more support for the veterans and the veterans' families, as well as the active duty military families, because they are serving just as hard as their active duty component is from their homes. It's not easy to be a spouse of someone who's overseas 10 months of the year, every 2 years. So I mentioned I'm with I was a strong right to work advocate. I want to see a national right to work law. I want to see every state have a right to work law, where you don't have to join a union just to get employed. You don't have to pay union dues for the privilege of working, because that's what a non-right to work state does. And I want to see that. Just a little bit more about right to work, and I'll move on. To me, right to work, the issue of right to work is an issue of accountability. I am not anti-union at all. And right to work organizations around the country are not anti-union. Unions have an important role to play in holding the management and ownership of a particular company accountable. Because if they're treating their employees like dirt, if the employees ought to be able to organize and put some pressure on them to do right by it. By the same token, if you force people to be in the union, they don't have a say whether or not they have to be in a union, then they have to pay dues against their will. If there's no one holding the union leadership accountable, then the union leadership can take all those union dues and spend it however they want. And that's what they do. The only way to hold the union leadership accountable is to pass a right to work law that enables the workers to quit the union and not lose their job. If a worker wants to be in a union, if they want to unionize, fine, they ought to be free to do that. But if they want to leave the union, they ought to be free to do that too. And in a non-white right to work state like West Virginia or Maryland, you can't do that and still keep your job. And that's just wrong. So it's an accountability issue. You hold the union leadership accountable by giving the union members the opportunity to leave, come and go whenever they want. Because if enough of them leave, there's no money for them to spend on their crazy projects. Or politics. Oh yeah, and that's what they usually do. That's what they usually do. Finally, I'm pro-immigrant. Everyone in this room, well, you have a little bit of Indian blood in you, so do I, Pocahontas. Okay? We all come from other places. We're all from an immigrant background. You're Irish. Kuiper, that's Dutch. Yeah. Griffin, that's Welsh, right?
Irish.
Okay.
English.
Yeah, so we all have ancestry that comes from other places. So we ought to all have a sympathy for immigrants. And but we're a sovereign nation, and we have the right to enforce our own boundaries and borders, and we should. The president's doing an important thing here. But we also have the right to limit who comes into the country to live here forever. And it's not unreasonable to ask the people that want to come in to be able to contribute something to us rather than become a drain on our nation. So we have immigration laws, and they are reasonable. There are a lot of immigrants trying to come in and want to come in, want to come move here and become Americans, and they have something to offer. they'll be able to sustain themselves and get involved in our culture. They'll bring their own newness to our culture, and that's wonderful. But there are a whole lot of people trying to get in that shouldn't be here. Some of them are bringing really noxious diseases. I'm just looking at this coronavirus thing. I mean, the president sealed our borders up pretty well, and he did it quickly, and I really appreciate that, because we don't know what's going on with that. But typhus, smallpox, we need to be able to screen people coming in. People that are coming in need to have something to do when they get here, so we don't become welfare recipients, things like that. And it's just reasonable that we do that. So, the people that do it the right way, we ought to honor them by promoting the law and order approach to immigration. That's what I do. Two other things, and I'll take some questions. I mentioned the coronavirus, and Sherry is very close to this right now because so many of her students in school she teaches at have families in China. And it's a little scary that I'm so close to someone who's so close to someone, you know? But that's the world we live in. I don't know if it's true at all, and I'm not really a conspiracy theorist too much, but the Wuhan province in China, which is where this started, is the home of one of China's most significant research and development facilities for biological warfare. And it wouldn't surprise me a bit if they're either testing it on their own population or if it somehow leaked out. Because they're not reporting everything. They won't let anyone else in to put eyes on the situation. That troubles me immensely. Our former congressman from the 4th District, which most of us used to live in before they redrawn the lines, is a guy named Randy Forbes. Now, Jim, you're personally acquainted with Randy. Randy, before he left his tenure up into Congress, was an expert on China. And one of the things I'm feeling led in my spirit to do is when I get up there is to try and fill his shoes up there as a China expert. I have a lot to learn, of course, and it took Randy a while to develop the skills and awarenesses that he did. But China, I believe, is the single most significant threat, government to government, people to people, that the United States faces today. They are building a large blue water navy. Blue water means they go a long ways off the coast. We have a big blue water navy. Okay? We use our navy to protect our coastlines from Asian and European threats. China doesn't need a blue water navy. They are threatening us strategically across the Pacific Ocean. They're building aircraft carriers and nuclear-powered submarines, and they can project power all the way up to the coast of California. They're also stealing our technology right and left. Espionage, industrial espionage, it's the theft, the outright theft of proprietary information from American designers and entrepreneurs and research and development. It's been going on for decades, and that has to stop. Because of who we are as a people, we're inherently creative, and we have the freedom to risk things that they don't do over there because they're communists. They have to steal it. All of their technological advances merely have come from somewhere else, not from China. And it's not the Chinese people who are involved. It's the system they're struggling to survive under. China's a problem, and we need to get a handle on it really fast. We are way behind the 8 ball. Keep it high. I mean, I bet every one of us wears all kinds of Chinese stuff that we're wearing or using. We are so dependent on China. There's so much stuff in America today, it's scary. We need to wean ourselves off of Chinese manufacturing completely until they get their act together as a government. We need to really be tough. The last thing I want to share with you, and this hopefully will fill you with some hope, because the only reason I feel like there's a legitimate chance for us to take on Bobby Scott this year and win is because, not just because we have an amazing president who's had a 3-year track record that just is blowing everyone's mind. Okay. And just about everyone's doing a whole lot better than we were 4 years ago. That's important, and it's going to be significant in the election. But even more so, It's this time last year, early March, I was up in Richmond. I was there for a rally called the March on the Mansion. And you'll remember late February last year, Governor Northam came out on television, and he advocated for and promoted legislation from the Virginia legislature that would allow a woman to deliver a baby, and if the doctor and the woman decided that she wasn't mentally or emotionally able to be a mother, they were going to let that baby die. And we all heard that, and we're going, what? That's not abortion, that's murder. And that's what it is. We're scratching our heads. So Governor Northam got challenged on it. A couple days later, he was on television again, and he asked him, is that really what you want? And he had a chance to step back from it, and he did not. He doubled down on it.
He's a baby doctor.
The man is a pediatric neurologist. His whole vocational career has been in the care of infants and newborns. It's inconceivable to me what that man's brain could be functioning like. And then within about a week or so, we began getting revelations about his blatant racist past. When he was an adult in his medical school, and you see that his medical school yearbooks, where he's dressed up as either a Klansman or the guy in blackface. And the man is a racist. So this march on the Mansion was promoted, and was pretty much a bunch of black Americans, black Virginians, who were strong evangelical Christians. And they were from all over the Commonwealth. I went up on a bus that left out of Portsmouth, and there were about 3 white people on that bus, and the rest of the bus was full of black people. And we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, and most of them are Democrats at the time. But we all had a common heart that abortion's wrong and that racism is wrong. And we all went up and we assembled on those steps of the Capitol, and it was raining. It wasn't raining hard, it was a drizzly rain. A little bit of a wind, and it was cold, like sometimes it can be. It was a miserable day. And yet there were still 400 or 500 people on the steps up there. And there were 6 or 8 different speakers. Most of them were black men. Most of them were pastors. And I heard for the first time in my adult political life, black leaders talking about a woman named Margaret Sanger, a way of belief about life called eugenics, and an organization called Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is the creation of this woman named Margaret Sanger, who is a very articulate voice for a way of believing called eugenics. It is a white supremacy orientation. And the whole focus of Planned Parenthood from the very beginning is the systematic destruction and elimination of the black race from the North American continent. That has been their specific goal since the very beginning. But you never heard black people talking about it. Now we are. And the same people that many black Americans that are Christians voted into office were the ones that were promoting the murder of a baby if the mother didn't want it, and the doctor agreed that it was a good idea. Things are changing in Virginia. Traditional black Democrat voters who are Christians are sick and tired of the destruction of their own babies legally, and they're sick and tired of the racism around them from the party that's supposed to have been taking care of them for the last 60 to 80 years. So we have a chance, we have an opportunity between what the president's been able to do to lift all of our economic lives up, and give us all more opportunity, and the way that traditional black voters think about life these days. So that we have a real opportunity to make a difference coming up this year. So I'm glad you're all here tonight. Let's take a few minutes and talk about anything you want to talk about. Anybody have anything that's heavy on your heart?
You mentioned with CBA,
our small group down here in Virginia and Jimbo, past 2 years ago, we made like 60, 70,000 phone calls for adults about the benefits. So, I mean, for the small group we have down there, we do that for the problem. So I'm looking forward to, I mentioned to Jeff that we now have a new leader. They took Dave Reed's place, and that should be pretty good. Get some more good things accomplished.
It's Concerned Veterans for America. It's all volunteers. There's one guy at the top who's a paid official. He's the regional coordinator. But yeah, the idea there is getting out and doing, getting involved. One of the reasons we're in the mess we're in today is because people like us who care stay home. I'm not saying any of you stay home, but enough people like us that believe like us and have a heart for what we have stayed home in the last election. And that's what happened in the legislature up in Richmond last year. Now we're in a sticky place. Because this year is 2020 and there's a census. And they're going to take the census data and they're going to redraw the district lines again. And the party in power up there is going to redraw the lines. And you know they're going to do it in a manner that enforces and enhances their position. So there's going to be hell to pay for folks like us for a long time in Virginia. Unless people like us get out and do what we know we need to do. We need to get out and we need to interact with our black neighbors one-on-one, find common ground with them, talk to them about things that are important to you, and they'll discover that they have the same kind of things that are important to them.
We need to have more events. We need to have more events where more people are involved in everything. We need to get people to catch, get involved.
That's right. One of the things I've kind of discovered in the last 6 or 8 months is there's a lot of differences between conservatives and liberals. One of them, which kind of hit me in the face, is the conservatives basically just want to be left alone. And they want to leave other people. It's not like that with liberals. The liberals have this passionate ministry to fix you, not themselves. They're about changing other people's lives without thinking about their own. And so they're naturally more actively involved in stuff. We have to meet them on the field of battle, the field of ideas. Now, I'm running a biblical campaign here. I'm not about getting into fist fights. I'm not into waving guns around and calling people names. We need to win them with our ideas. And of course, Jesus would say we need to love them. And we do. I mean, I think we're all Christians in this room. We need to love our neighbors, even if they aren't like us. Because Jesus said they'll know who we are by our love, and our love for one another. And that's what's going to change hearts. You can't change someone's heart at the end of a gun battle or at the end of a fist. You might be able to make them do something, but you can't change their heart. Only love can do that. And we need to be involved in a way we're out there, we're engaging them, we're convincing them, we're introducing them to ourselves, we're finding the common ground, things that we share in common. A lot of people have been believing lies their whole life. And you know enough about human pride to know that you don't like to admit you're wrong or you've been believing a lie. It isn't going to be easy to change some of this stuff, but we have to. We have to. And the only way to do it is by loving them, confronting them with the truth in a way that's not going to cause them to turn off. I think we can do it. I think we can. Anything else? Tim?
Bobby Scott is on the budget committee and has not lived up to the, getting this 12 separate bills out. He's more into this combining the number of bills, how they did with that maxi, whatever they call it, bill, omnibus bill.
Omnibus.
How can you sway the House of Representatives, because that's where, according to this Constitution, that's where everything that has to do with revenue starts. How do you address that big thing where for the last almost 20 years, they've not had a budget in 12 different areas? It's been omnibus, it's been partial omnibus, it's been this, been that. how do you first address that as a representative? I mean, you're going to go up there and you're going to be a rookie. Everybody's going to call you, you're the freshman this, freshman that. And unless you're like AOC and create all kinds of weird stuff, you know, how does that? And then secondly, the other issue on the biblical side, the boss of the House of Representatives now is Nancy Pelosi, and she's using scripture as if Christ was telling the government to do stuff, when, according to my knowledge of the scripture, I don't remember Jesus ever addressing any government people. He always addressed individuals. You donate, you give your money, you give your time, you do this, you love, you know, visit the people in the jail, the sick, the and they are taking this as, because it's not taken out of their own pocket, but taken out of everybody else, all the other taxpayers. How do you address that? You know, nicely say AOC. Now listen, it's not the government's job to do this. It's individuals. You're starting to quote Jesus now. He never addressed the government, other than one time he threw some tables over. You know,
Well, that was the Roman government. That was the Jewish.
it was even.
Well, those are good questions. These issues that I want to see us working on are long-term issues. It's going to take a long time to fix. It's taking a long time to get things to screw up. Okay? And we have to be in it for the long term. And for this reason, I'm not all that in favor of term limits. We need to get people up there who are good people, who are going to be willing to stick around and do it until it's done.
Are you believe in the Convention of States? I am.
Because it's in the Constitution, I don't believe it.
Well, and again, they're trying to push through three aspects: term limits, balanced budget, and forgive me, I forget the third thing. But I mean, it's established criteria of Convention of States. They can't change it. That's what they have to go with. And they've got about 16 states that passed it so far.
Yeah, let me
And
finish.
two-thirds.
Let me finish responding to Jim. So it's going to take a while to do it. So how do you deal with the issue of Nancy Pelosi, who uses scripture to justify what she's doing? The issue is education, and I don't think it's coincidental that when I got the sense in my spirit that God wanted me to do this campaign and run in this life, and I'm a teacher. My primary spiritual gifting is in teaching. And I don't think it's a surprise that they equip someone like me as a teacher to be able to have the heart and the desire and the will to do this. So, but it's going to take a long time. So one of the things we need to do is get someone like Nancy Pelosi out of the speaker's chair. And the only way that's going to happen is if the Republicans regain control of the House. Now that's not saying someone like her wouldn't end up in the chair again, just with our next to their name. But we need to confront him and call him out on it. You know, when she talks about, you know, charity, and I'm happy to confront her. Charity is something that's given out of love. Taxes, I don't know any human being in the world that gives taxes because they love you. Taxes are taken at the end of a gun barrel. If you don't pay your taxes, somebody's coming after your money, coming after your bank accounts. It is not going to be pleasant. The force of government takes our money in taxation. Now we have a say in what kind of taxes we pay through our representatives. But don't tell me that taxation is charity. It's inherently contradictory. Charity is when you decide you give money to someone else because they need it, or you just want to give it to them. That's charity. And that's what Jesus is talking about. So I'll go toe-to-toe with Nancy Pelosi on that issue. The other thing is this budgeting stuff. And I agree with you 100%. It's insane. What they keep doing is these continuing resolutions, where they say, okay, what we spent last year, we're going to increment by 2% and not change it, just put a little bit more money in it. And what that means is they're basically being lazy. They don't want to get in, they don't want to go line by line and discard things that aren't needed anymore. You know, they're still funding NASA programs for the space shuttle because of continuing resolution. We haven't had an active space shuttle since when? 2002 2 or something? But okay. But when you have a continuing resolution, which is what they do, they don't go through and scrub the old budget. They just continue it. So yeah, that is the truth. How do you do that? You're asking people to actually start working again in the committees, because every one of the 12 budget areas have their own committee, and each committee is supposed to hold hearings and develop a budget package for their thing, whether it's defense or veterans or, take your pick. Foreign affairs for the State Department. They gotta go through it and start new every year.
So I think Bobby Scott is vulnerable there.
Well,
In that budget. He's the most, he was on this years ago. And then they put him back on it. He's the, I don't know, second or third most senior person on that committee. He's gotta be doing something. He can't, we got the sense when we went up there and sat down in his office, that basically we had to wake him up and say, hey, we're here. I really don't think he's doing anything. Except he'll come up with some educational bill that promotes something at some university, and he sits there with, oh, look what I'm doing. And it's nowhere in the Constitution where he's supposed to be doing.
That's right. That's right.
It's just violating the Constitution, and especially on the budget. He's being lazy, really lazy.
Well, he's not the only one. I mean, it's institutionalized up there now. This laziness thing. It's going to take a new congressman, senators as well as representatives, with a new attitude about how things should go to make a change. And that's why we need to flush out a lot of the old dirt, a lot of the old wood. So, Richard, your convention of states things, I'm afraid of it personally, because the first time we had a convention of states, we ended up with the Constitution Act, which completely rewrote and redid the way they did government. Now, we had historically the Articles of Confederation. It's historical. That was the government we had right after the War of Independence. And it was weak. It wasn't working. So somebody proposed, they had these inter-state meetings where representatives from each states would come, they would talk about specific issues, trying to get an agreement on it, maybe outside of the government at the time. And they ended up saying, you know what, this federation government's not working. So they actually wrote a constitution without any real authority to do it. I mean, they had the state's authorities to do it separately, but the government at the time didn't know they were officially working on it. And they ended up with something that's truly remarkable. But we don't have people like that in our world. And if the same kind of thing ends up happening, then we stand to lose more than we stand to gain. And that's my big concern.
Well, from a conceptual standpoint, you're never going to get the Congress or the Senate to get a balanced budget, and you're never going to get them to vote for tournaments. So that leaves it up to us, the people. And via this article in the Constitution, that's the means that we can do it, Convention of States. And again, the Convention of States isn't just, it can't change. It's specific criteria that has to be passed along to each state. You can't modify it. It's got to stay in the same form as the original. So I personally think an advocate of balanced budgets and term limits, that's the way we have to do it. Let's do it.
I've talked myself into a position not wanting term limits. To me, term limits ought to happen in the ballot box every election. Now, it hasn't happened, and that's why you got a guy like Bobby Scott out there for 28 years. And so I have a sympathy for the position, but I don't think, I just don't think it's the right fix. I think the right fix is we need to activate people and get them so motivated to see change happen in the ballot. It goes back to laziness and inertia, ultimately. Not for us. I mean, we all came out tonight. It was raining. It's not us, but it's people we touch base with every day. It's people we interact with. It's neighbors that we know first, middle, and last names for. It's people we bump into in the cashier lines. If something needs to change, then let's make it change. But let's not mandate it. Because 61 years old. I'll be 62 this year. I have a lot of life left in me. And I believe that I'm called to spend the rest of my life in public service like this. If we have a term limit that says I can only serve 3 terms in the House, when I'm retiring from the House at the end of 6 years, I'm just getting to a place where I'm starting to have some influence. Now, I could get elected for the Senate, but then the same process starts over. I'll be a freshman senator. Now, yeah, that's a 6-year term. But when I'm up there with people that have been there for 2 or 3 terms in front of me, I'm still a junior man at the moment, and I don't have a lot of influence. The way things work up there is you have to be around long enough to get into a position where you can really make a difference.
I guess, talk about term limits. I'm for the concept, you know, we can bicker back and forth maybe what that number should be. I guess there's too many mini kings and queens in both houses of Congress. You know, I don't like when they say, oh, you know, let's hear it up for a round of applause for Congressman so-and-so for their 40 years of service. I don't want anybody in for it, whether it was my guy or not. I don't want them there for 40 years. Things don't change. Nobody dares to challenge that guy. I mean, they can just walk into a room and change the whole atmosphere of the room. I don't want that. Our family was envisioning all the good, and that was obviously the mentality at that time. So I guess they felt there's no reason to write that into the Constitution, just like Trump for president. You know, someone came from that with FDR, and quickly, put on the president. Why can't we come up with something that, you know, maybe it's 6 years, maybe it's 12 years, or whatever that number is. Give them enough time where they can, if they're successful, give them enough time to work through something, because it does take time to push agenda through. It may take multiple, you know, it may take almost a decade or something, you know, like that. So I get that. Let's, you know, give them time to do that, but if you can't get it done in a decade or so, maybe we need to try a different approach, or maybe something different, or whatever. Yeah, we don't want anybody to oppose here, right? Late Senator Byrd. Just seems like there's a lot of good work.
Yeah.
People go in with the minimum wage and they come out
But
there.
it's fault is that. That's right. It's not the people we send to Congress or the Senate fault. It's our fault. So
That's
we need to take
been going on for 20 years. So that's a tough road to say, okay, electorate, I'm in charge now, get your rear end out of that couch and go out.
We do it with the president.
Well,
We do it with Congress.
people, I mean, I'm in a big out. We go to the door catch just a few months ago. Okay? So, I mean, at work, I used to tell people, you voting today? Oh, it's just the school board. And I said, what do you mean just the school board? So, I mean, trying to get some people interested in the process. And you're right, that's the way it should be. But realistically,
Well, Richard and Sharon, the election officers, they're engaged. They're in the process.
we're talking about education earlier. You know, from the beginning of this country's history, education was all, you know, private. And there was a progressive movement, their vision is centuries in the future. You know, they start small, start going into public schools, and then you know where they're going. There's like, look, why not try and, you know, first of all, the federal government doesn't have any business in any education. Yeah, the Department of Education doesn't educate anybody. The Department of Energy doesn't produce any energy, and so on and so forth. No other departments. But education impacts the states. And that's gonna, if we're gonna have public school, at least give vouchers. That's a little hard choice to go to a private school that offers superior education. You know, public school obviously is not working. You call that a private school for a reason. I mean, what is it that you didn't like about the public school when you said you don't want to do?
Well, you know the answer to
Yeah, I
private
mean,
school.
we'll be here all night.
In private school, parents are engaged.
And discipline.
Good to see you too.
See you soon.
I went to both these schools, primary school and high school.
Thanks, man.
My ear, unfortunately, is still attached to my head.
Richard! So many parents don't have an option to even consider sending their children to private school. They can't imagine affording it. Vouchers is a good idea, but I think it's only an interim idea. Because a voucher comes from where? It comes from the government. It's taxpayer, right? So the government's still involved at the higher level in telling you how you can spend your money. You have to ask them. What if you're the one here with the youngest child, I think. What if you wanted to send Tony to private school full time?
I did. It's not cheap.
Okay, so what if every cent you spent every year for education came right off the top of your taxes at the state and the federal level? So you are completely reimbursed. You didn't pay for every cent you spent on this education. That money doesn't go to the government. It goes right straight into your son's future. What if we could do that?
You know, it's funny, and it's probably because I'm being naive. But I used to think to myself that, well, you know, if they close up this private school, without paying X number of dollars to send my kids, they're going to have to go to public school. And that's going to cost them the public school system money. So, I don't know why there was so much adversity towards not helping support these private schools.
Some of the school says that they got all kinds of money for that.
Yeah.
They get paid, they want all the schools.
Virginia is one of the most homeschool and private school friendly states. At least it was this time last year.
Can I ask you one, Jackson? You said something about couples basically penalized for being married. Where do you stand on taxes? How would you reduce them? What would you like to see? What changes would you like to see in our taxes?
Well, this is going to be the rest of my question too. I'll say this. From a biblical perspective, it's not for start on every issue like that. You look and see what is the biblical precedent. There's only one place in Scripture where you see income-based tax. That's the time. But I don't find anywhere in Scripture where individuals had to tell the priest how much money he made, so the priest knew that he was paying for 10%. That was truly individual. That's the only income tax that the Bible references. Now, they did have a flat temple tax, but everyone paid. Everyone paid the same amount. It didn't matter if you were wealthy or poor, you paid the temple tax. And that meant that everyone was equal at the temple. No one paid more. No one required more. So, I would like to see the elimination of the income tax. That's going to be hard to do. Number one, because the government's absorbing the government is drunk on all the income from people. And so we have these massive deficits. So it's going to take another long haul to get this thing fixed. So the first place I would go would be move to a flat tax. Across the board flat tax. Where everyone pays the same percentage. Yeah, no deductions. None. Everyone pays the same percentage above a certain well-defined level. So if your poverty level is $20,000 a year for a family, and you make $22,000 a year, then you're going to pay the same percentage as someone making $200,000. That to me is fair. It shouldn't matter who makes what and how much they make. I don't like the idea whatsoever of government doing it. In fact, one of the Bill of Rights that talks about being secure in your papers is talking about your income. The federal government has no knowledge, no business like that at all. Because that kind of knowledge is a lot of power.
So basically, we have two constitutional amendments not to take each other. Authorize, you know, they authorize the IRS.
You're right.
We've been doing great as a country up until 1913. They slipped it into it. Christmas Eve or whatever.
That's exactly right.
And it's shady roundabout way.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
And
right.
also, you know, making some of those popular records.
That was another good point.
It should be represented.
So I would move from progressive income taxes to a fair tax, flat tax. Whatever they decide it should be, 12, 14, 15%. Above a certain amount, and then no deductions. That's where I move first. And once we get things get back to we start moving, eliminate the income tax completely with federal sales tax. We just can't snap our fingers and make it happen. It's just going to be tyrannical. I don't see a need for the Federal Reserve at all. You know, the Federal Reserve is not part of our government.
Nothing federal tax.
They are a series of independent private banks chartered by the federal government. The president appoints the board with the advice.
You can have this.
So, but we actually borrow the money we have in our pockets and wallets and purses now. Our Federal Reserve cards, we actually rent the money from the Federal Reserve, and we pay interest on it as a government. Did you know that? Part of a good part of our national debt is the interest payments on the currency in circulation. We don't even own our own currency as a government. And it's backed by nothing. We do it with pay for credit. So that's something I want to really get involved in here. Is learning more about that, finding the best way to get us out of that environment. Let me just say this: the president's going to link the president of Russia right here in Cuba. Now there was this 2-year debacle about that, and of course there was a time when he was interacting with on television, and they seemed to get along pretty well and respect each other. And of course the Democrats are just all over that. But here's something that President Putin has that we know. They have control of that. The Russian people have a true currency that's their own. There's just a few places in the world that want to have it. The international monetary fund and international bankers don't control.
We're trying to interfere with it. Iran's well. They control their own currency.
Yeah.
And China's trying to
Well,
kill us.
Iraq used to,
Yeah.
and so did Libya.
Better than both of them.
And we turned them both over to the International Monetary Fund and our military forces, which is to our shame. So, yeah, there's a lot that needs to be done, and it's going to take a concerted effort by a lot of people.
And then if you talk about China, right now with this whole virus going on, there's evidence right there why we should not put all our eggs in one basket. We can't get product now. I mean, I'm a security company. I've gotten emails from all the manufacturers now. Our product may be delayed now because a certain component, even though it may be made here in North America, components are obviously worldwide. And now it's putting a hit on it. We need to create a more business-friendly environment in this country to attract business to come back, set up shop. I mean, look at World War II. We didn't win World War II because we had the best technology in all areas. We won because we could outproduce the enemy, multitudes more than they could destroy it. We produced everything for all our allies. Why can't we? And we did it overnight. We transformed industry to produce everything that was needed for the entire Allied forces. Why can't we do that right now? We did it as a country. I don't care who, we can integrate that, but yeah, we did it.
Rosie the Riveter.
Baseball too.
What are the mechanics now to get you, we're gonna have the convention, right? And we determine who's,
One, there's a primary election.
when is that?
June 9th. I need 1,000 ballot signatures to get on the ballot signatures, which means someone from the 3rd district who is a registered voter. I'll have to turn in probably 12 or 1,500 to make sure I have a minimum 1,000. When I turn it in, I need to turn it in with a filing fee of $3,480. So these are due by probably the 20th or 24th of March. So I'm looking for helpers to circulate petitions, I'm well over halfway to where I need to be, but I really need to crank it up here in the next couple of weeks. And I need financial support. I need contributions to the company. I have a website.